Hello, everyone, and welcome to a rather special Into the Black Archive episode because we've reached, I guess you could call it, Owen, the end of the first era of Doctor Who. This episode, this great big gargantuan monster of an episode.
The end of the black and white era. We are going into colour. Next time we speak, it will be in colour.
Yes, I mean, I noticed that when I finished the 10th episode, and you know how BritBox occasionally just runs straight into the next one before you can even have time to think?
Yeah.
It did to me, and I saw the colour version of the Pertwee intro, and I almost shed a tear. I couldn't believe there was colour again. I haven't seen colour since 2020.
What are all these colours? It's so weird.
Yes, I've actually been watching... We watched Flux in black and white, just to, feel good. So it's nice.
Oh, God. And strangely, as well, because we're normally super critical of long Doctor Who stories, like if it's a six-parter, 9 times out of 10, we will not like it. Anything longer than that, even bigger chance. But this, I almost rewatched it. And it's 10 parts.
Now, what Owen doesn't know, and I'm telling him now, is that I watched all 10 parts back to back.
I did the same thing, but excluding episode 1.
Fair enough. And I did not think I would be able to do it. But you just kind of get lost in it. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, we're on part 6, 7 now. Well, I might as well keep going. I've already done more than half
It's one of the rare classics, which I, actually enjoyed watching and felt like I wanted more.
And it's one of the few classics that really does deserve to be called classic. Classic is the right word. This has everything you could want in a Who story. The premise is so off the wall and so ridiculous you think they can't pull it off, but they do.
I wish I went in without knowing the twist. So
I wish, because everyone who knows it.
Yeah, I'm not joking here. If through some miracle you do not know the twist in this episode, stop listening to this podcast now and go watch it and then come back. Because I wish I had that experience.
I was wondering throughout a lot of it, I wonder what this would have been like to watch, in present, when it was running on the air, because that must have been a whole... The last episode and a half, if I take my own perspective out of it and think of the perspective of where you were at the time,
yeah,
it's phenomenal television.
I'm going to disagree with you there.
I think it hits all the things you want. It has the right energy.
I agree with you up until the last episode.
Someone doesn't like those. Well, we'll get into those. What those are?
Generally speaking, I feel like the entire story for those 9 parts is really well done for pacing. There's a few points where I feel like it's a little bit slow, but other than that, it's perfect. But then it kind of feels like that ending, yes, I know why the ending is there, but it feels like it only exists for that reason. It feels like it is the prologue to a really good story.
I can see that. I view it the other way, and I think we've never had really a Doctor Who story that has ended like this. Not really. Because usually they just run off, we get back in the TARDIS and it ends. The fact that we get back in and we've still got another part to go is, I think, the first realization of what they're setting up. I think it's just really cleverly handled.
Yeah.
And it subverts your expectations. But hey,
I feel like it's a weird one. I feel like they could have done it in a way which worked better. But I feel like because it does feel like they're just in one set and they're just talking at each other for most of it, it does just feel a little bit odd.
But there is the enigma and the mystery around it. I think you can view it both ways. But the thing that shows you how classic this episode is, listeners, is we haven't even mentioned the title of this 10-part story yet. Not once. Because, frankly, if you know Who, you already know what episode we're talking about.
And I'd hope so, because it's in the title and the thumbnail.
And that. So yeah, this is the War Games. And this is Into the Black Archive. Hi everybody, James and Owen here to talk through the last episode of Black and White Doctor Who, the last episode of Patrick Troughton, the last episode of Fraser Hines, the last episode of everything we've known before we enter a whole new universe, apart from the Brig and Unit. But
a whole new universe.
We have those back.
Whole new universe. Earth.
In the 20th century. How amazing it is to be excited by absolutely nothing at all.
It's this episode. This is the thing which I love about this episode, right? We can go into characters and plot and all that kind of stuff later. I just want to say this.
Yes, and we will.
I just want to say this. Everything could have gone wrong with this episode.
Yeah.
And it would have been justifiably wrong. Like they could have absolutely screwed up for pacing like they've done in every other story this season. And last season, to be honest. They could have completely screwed the pooch on that ending. They could have completely just screwed up the plot twist. The characters could have been the most boring thing you have to drag yourself to watch for 10 parts. But the side characters are perfect. The bad guys are perfect. The pacing is perfect. The only thing which annoys me is that ending. That's it.
I have a slightly different take, but a lot of it's the same in that we've had a lot of those stories where we criticise them for being kind of overambitious and we think, how many parts? You know, even Dalek Invasion of Earth being 6 parts, you can make some argument against that, and anything longer. The Invasion's great, but 8 parts is a lot. This is a 10-part episode of the War Games. It is the longest Doctor Who story we have covered thus far on this show.
Do you want to know something else which completely blows me away?
Go for it.
This was never meant to be a 10-part.
What was it meant to be?
It was meant to be a 4-part story followed by a 6-part story. But that
and they just combined it into what?
The 4-part story just collapsed. They just couldn't do it. It wasn't feasible.
So also the 6 had to become a 10.
I don't know. I don't know if it became a 10 or if it just restarted from scratch and they just made this 10. But in fact, it was never planned. But it worked.
We have had good episodes. Oh, right, we don't want to be too crazy because there are some issues. There are some, and I will get into them. I think the one issue is in the middle it gets a little bit repetitive. And it could have been shorter, although the pacing is good throughout.
That's the one thing for me throughout the entire story is it's when they first go into sort of like the main headquarters of the baddies. That when they first go into that, I feel like they spent a little bit too long farting around in there. That's the only issue I've got with the pacing.
But the fact is that usually we have massive pacing issues, whereas this is like maybe 3 minutes, 4 minutes here or there. You know, maybe this could have been a little longer, maybe this could have been a little shorter. We're almost in nitpick territory. Which,
I mean, I know which we joke about how much we love nitpicking, but also it does become a little bit frustrating when it's actually quite good.
Yeah, this is still very well paced, even with those minor things. And the fact is, nearly everything's got minor pace issues. It's very, very hard to work out the natural pace of something. It's a quite subtle art, which doesn't have many rules. And
the fact which they managed to do it over 10 parts and keep my attention, I am impressed.
The thing is that even the best Doctor Who stories we've done, even Dalek Invasion of Earth and even The Faceless Ones and Evil of the Daleks, which I'm going to mention, even though it's not that good, are good stories. This feels like a whole series of television. That's the scope of it. It's like a television series, and you just binge it. It's in and out, and it's wonderful, and you enjoy all of it. I mean, look, we couldn't recommend this enough. So if you haven't seen this, before we actually get into the detail, please, for the love of God, go find it. The War Games. Do watch it. Come back when you've watched it, and we'll talk, because we are going to talk spoilers, and it's going to be the whole thing. So don't go in without knowing you've had your fair warning. Now,
yes,
that people have had their fair warning,
shall we?
What happens at the end of this episode?
We come across the Doctor's people. But are they his people?
His family.
But are they his people?
Well, they're not nice people for him.
But are they equal?
Are they equal, you say?
I'm thinking down this path because of a little bit of trivia. So you know how the Doctor goes, the Time Lords are my people.
Yeah, but they're not. But he doesn't mention that they're his friends. Yeah,
That isn't what he's meant to say. As scripted,
what was he meant to say?
he's meant to say the Time Lords are the rulers of his people.
Ah, so are you saying to me that the Doctor was never meant to be a Gallifreyan?
Never meant to be a Time Lord.
Oh right, yeah. So he is a Gallifreyan. That's canonical still, but not a Time Lord. It would have been the same setup as we had in all of the season 3 episodes, where it was an oppressing race and a subjugated one. Hey, that's interesting. And it does explain something. It does explain something to me that felt a bit out for the Time Lords, but now I can explain that, which was the whole thing. The war chief actually dies. It's just like, what if he was really a Time Lord? Wouldn't he just regenerate? But that obviously explains it. Perhaps they hadn't worked that out yet.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Like they still reveal they reveal the Time Lords, but they're still making up as they go along. They never say the name's Gallifrey. They never say they were Gallifreyan.
No, they've not. The lore isn't really there. It's still really enigmatic at this point.
Which is something which I feel like they could have gone wrong with. Because you can argue with this ending, which it pull back the curtain, it reveals the mystery about who the Doctor is. But they don't go too far. That comes later on in Doctor Who universe, where they do go too far. But here...
Oh, very much so, but not now.
Here, they do it perfectly.
It's just enough where you feel like it's a massive development and it furthers your understanding of it, but at the same time, everything is kept under like a lock and key, and it still feels like a mystery. And if anything, it raises more questions than answers. A lot of it,
yeah.
And I just think the way they did the Time Lords is so good. But tell you what,
shall we start with some characters?
Shall we go for a plot synopsis?
Ooh.
Do you want to try plot synopsis this? Because we've got to try it, right? It's a huge one.
Right. Can I do this? That is the question.
I'll even if you start to falter, I'll even try and jump in. I'll even try myself. It's a lot of groundwork.
At the end, I'll tell a dad joke as a reward for us both.
That's like a cleansing dad joke. I like that.
Yeah, should we go with that?
For the listeners at home, yes, go for it.
Right, so for Dr. Zoe and Jamie land in World War II. One.
Yes, it's World War One. It's the trench one.
The trench one. Where they come across an ambulance, they get taken back to base, where they then get sent to HQ. But there's a few issues here. The ambulance driver, Lady Jennifer, and the Sergeant Carstairs don't seem to remember what their life was before they were here. They just kind of appeared. So they go to HQ headquarters, where there is a bit of a dodgy trial. Let's be honest here. It was a bit shady. But they all get sent off away, and then we see there's something weird here. General Smythe has got something hidden away. And no, I was going to put a joke here, but I don't know what I was going to put there as a joke. So we're moving on. And then Jamie comes across a red coat which has come out of time, which starts leading us to little snippets of idea, which is not actually World War One. And then that happens. We realise they're being lorded over by particular people, and then we try to escape. We go into the Roman times. We then come out of the Roman times, and then we then get. Did we get caught again?
Yeah, there's the American Civil War
stuff.
stuff.
I'm trying to look at. Did they get to the American Civil War stuff, or were they captured at some point between Roman and Civil War?
No, they weren't captured during the Romans bit. They just managed to get out of that, and then they arrived in the Civil War. Where they
went into Civil War, where they discover not a TARDIS, Radcliffe,
Russell.
No, I'm all about the ship.
Is that Russell on the Wall? Oh, you're on about the ship. I can't remember the name of the ship.
No, they find some ship which is essentially a box and a magical door. So they go off from there. They then go off. They start to uncover stuff. People get kidnapped, and then they come back again. Then they go back again, and then the story sort of ends. I've run out of steam.
Should I pop back in from where you left off? Right, okay, I'll hop back in. So, once they go through the magic door box thing, that's the Doctor and Zoe. Jamie's behind with the rest of the fighters who have kind of formed a resistance.
Motley crew.
Yeah, a bunch of people from different times and eras who've been pulled out and have realised that, and so they're forming a resistance now.
1 second.
Jamie's with them.
Just to say, there's a lot of brainwashing going on. For Resistance have realised they've been brainwashed and have sort of have come out of brainwashing.
Like they had a processing system, don't they? And the processing doesn't work on them because they're just quite strong of mind. Was the explanation given? It's a bit woolly. I'm just going to say it doesn't work on some people. Yeah, it just sort of says, apart from these people, whatever. Anyway, they find out that that's what's going on. The Doctor and Zoe meet a bunch of people, including the person in charge of security, who is convinced that the Doctor's in on the whole thing. You've got the War Chief, who has his own plans, and then you have the War Lord, who looms over everything, and he's unseen for like the first 7 parts, and you just hear about him. And then when he arrives, it's not that imposing. It's just a guy with a beard.
No, it's a budget Steve Jobs lookalike.
He has a turtleneck on as well, doesn't he? Yeah, the turtleneck lord comes in and he lays down the law. And anyway, yeah, so it goes, there's all sorts of mishaps, everyone gets kidnapped and comes back. Anyway, skipping on a bit, we then discover that the War Chief, who is, under the Warlord, is actually a Time Lord. So he's the Time Lord, and he's run away from the Time Lords like the Doctor.
No way.
He knows that the Doctor's a Time Lord, and he tries to get him to cooperate. The Doctor lies that he's going to cooperate with him, does a whole pull the wool over his eyes, isn't cooperating with him, but then realises that the only way to solve the problem is to confront the problem he's been running from the whole time.
My God.
Them Lords of Time must be called... And unfortunately, when you call the Time Lords, you have to answer the phone, and he answers the phone with a whole set of punishments, and his companions get put back in time, and he gets given John Pertwee's face, which is probably the biggest crime of all.
So then the Time Lords come, and they are put on trial. Steve Jobs, looky-likey, gets sentenced to death.
Not just death, full deletion from time. He never existed.
Right.
They get dematerialised.
So, shall we talk about our characters?
Yeah, the many characters to talk about in this.
Shall we talk about the final appearance of the second Doctor?
Mr. Troughton himself.
Yes.
The not entirely 3-season run, the 2 and most of a season run of Patrick.
Yeah.
Because 10th Planet was episode 1 story 1 of the 4 series. I think it's been a great Doctor who's been hampered by not as good writing. It's a bit like the Peter Capaldi situation.
Yeah, it's been one which I feel like could have thrived quite a lot, but then I feel like his first season was excellent.
Yeah, the first season's great.
But since then, it's kind of... The writing started to fade during his second season. And then
As
just
did the
everything this season, from production to writing, from character work, all just seems a little bit...
stale.
Yeah. Like, with the exclusion of... I'm fairly sure we'll both agree. The exclusion of this one and the invasion, this entire season's been forgettable. Not just in story-wise, set-wise, costuming-wise. Like, there's just been nothing there to really spark anything.
But the positive is that Patrick Troughton in the War Games gets one final shot to show what he's about. And this is my favourite Patrick Troughton story. And it's the best things he does are in this.
Yeah.
And I think that is why I do like the ending, because the way Troughton plays it is fantastic.
Yeah.
It reveals almost all of... Because what I've liked about Troughton is that he's felt more enigmatic than Hartnell did. Hartnell always felt kind of... He was a bit aloof, but you could get at him. You understood why he was aloof. Troughton was a bit more... He liked to play his cards close to his chest, and he was always a bit playful, but you never really knew what was going on inside a lot of the time. And it's only when he has to call the Time Lords that you realise what he is. And it's like that entire 3 seasons was building to figuring out what that Doctor was.
Yeah.
And it's brilliant. It just all culminates.
It's one of those stories where his character was so good, you don't really think about it. Because you're just enjoying being with him so much. And the story which we're being led down.
Yeah, and you realise that this story almost just undoes him. It undoes the game almost. The game he's been playing for years. Obviously that's the twist. People who didn't know that. The fact that the Doctor, yes, he is a Time Lord, but he is a fugitive from the Time Lords with a TARDIS that isn't his and has been stolen from them.
Yeah.
Breaking the laws of his people outright, and has absolutely no real defence for himself either.
Mm-hmm.
He is just a runaway.
Yeah. As I said, it's definitely one of the highlights. Shall we move on to our companions?
Yes, and as well, I like that this episode gives Zoe and Jamie lots to do. Both of them get lots to do. It's the most I've seen Jamie do in nearly 2 seasons.
Yeah, it's the first time when he hasn't felt actively irritating, I think, this entire season.
Yeah, I mean, he gets to deploy his worst misogyny joke of the run, but maybe should that be an award this year? Because there's been so many but you're a woman jokes in the last season.
Doctor Who.
Honestly, should make it an award. But yeah, Jamie gets to do a lot of... It's the Action Man stuff, sure. It's no different to what we've had from Jamie or Ian or any of the male companions, really. But it feels like it culminates his entire run. And we have to remember that Jamie has been here for longer than 2 has.
No,
Second Doctor.
Oh, yeah. No, I was trying to work out the order.
Jamie was there with... Yeah.
I was trying
Jamie's
to work out...
Jamie's in the 10th planet.
Jamie's not in the 10th planet.
Is he not?
No.
Is he not? Oh, it's the moon base, isn't it? They look so similar.
No, this is what I was trying to work out in my head. Jamie has been there less, but only by like an episode.
Right, okay, so yeah, it's only just about...
That's why I've been quiet, because I was in my head trying to work out the story orders.
It's because I remember making this joke about how the 10th planet and the moon base are so darn similar. They're the same story, so I want to make a combination of them. Anyway, let me rephrase that. So Jamie's been there as long as the Second Doctor has, pretty much. And so even that feels like a momentous moment, losing him as well. Like, this is a 1-2 double gut punch.
What do you feel about the way of getting rid of the companions here?
Is it an easy writing play? Yes. But does it play on the heartstrings and work emotionally? Yes.
Yeah. It's
one of the best goodbyes we've had. One of the better ones.
To me, it follows my most hated story trait. It was
all a dream.
All we end, but with erase the main character's memories of the events.
Yeah, it's a very convenient way to get them out.
It just feels like yes, we're not seeing them afterwards. So it doesn't really matter. But it just feels like we're going ahead. We've spent, particularly with Jamie, we've spent 3 years with him. And then we're just erasing any of the progress he's made. I'd
have preferred it if their memories were kept to an extent, or they were like echoes of memories. Like, occasionally they would just see echoes of it, but I don't know. It'd be hard to kind of get that across. And also, from another perspective, it shows you how powerful the Time Lords are, so it is serving another story purpose.
Yeah.
But I do get your point, and I see my point, and I think it's a better goodbye than we had with Ian and Barbara. I think it's a better goodbye than we had with Dodo for sure. And
I think Ian and Barbara's one was better.
Barbara and Ian's one just felt really out of nowhere.
I feel like how they dealt with their leaving. They remembered their memories. They had a good time together. They let them live long, happy life with the memories.
That's a better ending
compared to the ending, which we got here of they all just lost their memories.
Yeah, and it's why when Russell, when we get to New Who, when he'll inevitably do his great big mentions of classic companions because he's been doing it for ages now. When he never really talks about Jamie and Zoe because he can't, and the man is a stickler for canon.
Yeah, he's one of the things which just I don't like. I don't like that way of ending a story, and they did it that way. But we've talked about Jamie. Let's move on to Zoe.
Actually, there's one more thing I did want to mention about Jamie, and it's relevant to Zoe as well, so it'll segue in. Is that I like the way that their mini stories within this were structured to really refer to things that happened in the past. It does wrap up their stories really well.
Yeah.
Like, for example, one of the first things Jamie does is he sees his sworn enemy from the war he came out from before, which automatically sets up thoughts about home and thoughts about going back to a normal life.
He comes across a red coat and they learn to work together, but they then erase that in a few episodes' time, and he goes back to war with a red coat.
Yeah, but it's about getting home, and
that is why I don't like that sort of storyline. We get over these barriers and then we just shove the barriers.
I think it would have been better if they remembered it personally, but I don't mind it because I understand what purpose it's serving.
Yeah,
and then moving on to Zoe, it's a similar thing. Zoe gets to reference all of the things she's been able to do. For example, she uses all the first smarts again. For example, memorizing all the resistance stuff, working out how the processing machine works. Being born in the 21st century, that whole scene. And she's just as active as ever. I think Zoe's been the best, apart from Barbara, the best female companion we've had. And it's close with Barbara at times, especially in this episode.
I do. For one thing I want to say is I wish we had more of Zoe. I wish we had her for longer. We really
have not had much with her.
And all of her stories, not for her fault, have been just a bit lackluster.
Apart from this is the one great. The invasion's pretty good as well, but this is the one great story she gets.
Let's put it this way here. I guarantee you, when we do the end of season review next week, this and the invasion will be the top two.
Oh, and I know what order it'll be in as well. So don't get too worried. We're mainly just going to be talking about those two episodes and struggling to talk about the other ones.
As we attempt to remember them.
Well, the Dominators is good fun because we'll just say destroy over and over again. So
I've just finished editing. I've just finished editing that podcast. Oh my god!
Did you say destroy a lot in that recording?
We get sidetracked on complaining about Moffat, and and for around 15 minutes I get sidetracked about talking about audio dramas.
Gotta love these forgettable season 6 stories. Just send you in different paths.
Should we talk about our side characters we had then? Because
there are loads, aren't they?
So many good ones.
There. Where do you?
Should we start with
War Chief? War Chief feels the most important to the wider story to me.
Shall we start off with who we met first, and then we go through?
So you want to talk about Carstairs and Lady Jennifer?
Order of appearance, kind of thing.
So Lady Jennifer's first, then.
Let's talk about Lady Jennifer. She is.
Where does she go? We kind of lose her towards the end.
Midway through, I was sat there going, "Wait, what happened to Lady Jennifer?" And then I remembered, it's the words right out of the story, which was so unnecessary. So you remember at the end where they all come back through the TARDIS ship thing?
Yeah, through essentially the space-time door.
I've forgotten the name for Chief of the American Resistance.
Oh, Russell, I think his name is.
Russell goes, people back at base camp need a medic. Are you ready to go and help them?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, and she just gets told, no, you can be a nurse. Yeah. Because she's a nurse, so she goes off and does the nurse things, and we don't see her again. And then she's only mentioned right at the end where Carstairs goes, well, I would like to find Jennifer, see who the hell she got to.
Yeah,
It's a shame, really. I thought she was great in the first few episodes.
she was such good character to be around, and then we just kind of go.
She was sparky,
Who?
fighty.
Who?
Yeah, and then by the end, I get it, because it is, in some cases, in the mid parts, there's a lot of characters. Personally, I think there's maybe too many. And they had to make some cut decisions, but maybe they didn't make the right choice in general. I think they should have kept her and maybe introduced less resistance people and kept that a little bit
tighter.
Yeah, a little bit tighter, because there's quite a few.
Or just not naming people and just having them.
Yeah, because there's I can't remember his name, but it's going to sound terrible when I say it. The black guy, who appears maybe like an episode and a half, and is kind of the first person you see that can resist the processing.
Yeah.
But he dies quite quickly.
Yeah.
Then you have Russell, and then towards the end you obviously meet Mr. VR, who is an incredible parody of the Latin community, and one that I respect.
Yeah, it's a shame. I understand why they had to do it. There's only so many characters you can keep track of, but equally it's a shame because she was fun to be around, and I also, in an odd way, it's one of those things of I'd rather have her been killed off than given that sort of crappy just go and be a medic.
Yeah, it's just a bit of a cop-out narratively, but it's one of the very few issues. And there are some, but they're very few.
Yeah.
Carstairs, on the other hand, is really around for the whole thing.
I would have been more than happy to have him as a companion. I have to be honest.
He reminds me of Ian a lot, I think is the best way to say it. He's very similar to Ian and has that strong head on his shoulders and is willing to get in the action, has a good mind. Just a very solid character and always just seemed like a good bloke.
Yeah, I would be, as I'm saying, more than happy to have him stay on as a companion. I wouldn't have cared. He was fun to be around.
I think Terence Dix, who mainly wrote this, knew that the War Games was going to be the culmination not only of that season, but of really the whole of Who up to that point. Like a celebration of all that had happened. I think Carstairs and Jennifer is just an Ian and Barbara reference. Because they are very, very similar to those characters, and they kind of have a similar relationship.
Yeah.
They're both work colleagues who both obviously care for one another. They have similar personalities. I think it's a pretty clever reference to those two characters. And like a subtle nod of the hat without getting too bogged down.
And luckily Barbara was written out in a much better way.
Well, yeah. Yeah. And then, beyond that, there's other characters we meet along the way, mainly the villains of the piece, and there are quite a few.
Yes.
And all of them pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't feel like we need to go into all of them individually, because I don't want this podcast to drag on as long as...
No, not majorly.
Go on as long as War Games.
we can make some mentions, for example.
Yeah.
The guy who's doing the processing experiments, he's sort of funny for the couple of episodes he's around for. The head of security, who is just obsessed with the idea that he's being double-crossed the whole thing and is so egotistical about it, he makes everything go worse.
Yeah, he's one of those people which you can just tell just don't know what they're doing and just actively screw over everyone, including themselves.
Yes. There is, of course, General Smythe, who has 6 episodes of being built up as being really intelligent, really smart, the main villain of the piece, ends up being like 4th in command on one little part of the whole thing and just gets shot out of nowhere.
Him and the, can't remember his name, but the German leader. There was one moment in this... Capitan. I loved how we built them up to be these big enemies at the beginning, and then we had the twist, and it's literally just those two just at a table planning out how to kill the other team's morale for best. I just loved it. I just loved that interaction between the two of them.
It's very Doctor Strangelove, and bearing in mind Doctor Strangelove had only come out about 4 years before this episode went out. There's a lot of references to the war room and all of the kind of stupidity of war. It's subtle again, but I just think the way it's written, it's clear that they've really thought about this, and it's very well put together. And then there's Turtleneck Lord.
Yes. Which just marches around, bark stuff, general Doctor Who, supreme leader kind of good dude. He starts off being really clever, but then kind of at the end just gets proven to be an idiot.
Yeah, and has probably the most brutal way to go, going as if he was never there in Who history up to this point.
Yeah. And then we've also got, of course, the other Time Lord, the third Time Lord we get introduced to in Doctor Who.
And who are the first two? The Doctor and the Monk.
Yes.
Yes, well, yeah, I wonder what did happen to the Monk. Maybe the Monk changed his appearance and was the War Chief. Who can know?
I think, strangely enough, talking about audio adventures, I think I've just come across the Monk in one of my audio adventures, but I'm not sure yet.
Really?
I'm yet to come across the twist.
That's interesting.
Well, they've just.
I wonder if the Monk is showing up.
They've just gone into a monastery where there's a monk which is acting a little bit weird. And I know if a monk does turn up at some point in this season.
Well, perhaps we're about to find out where he got to. Yeah.
Sorry,
the War Chief probably has the. No, that's fine. The War Chief probably has the most interesting of the most interesting motivation and story arc in that we're never really told what this race is. We're just told that they are a race.
Yeah.
It's not important to the story. They're just a group. They're an alien race who want to conquer the galaxy, and this War Games gamut is to work out what the most efficient way of killing people is, so that they can take over the galaxy faster. Really, they should have just called Sontarans up, but here we go. We're doing this, or the Daleks, and they've essentially they've sought out. Well, the Time Lord apparently came to them, didn't he, and gave them sort of Time Lord help.
Yes.
To make this happen, because obviously creating a world that combines ancient Rome and and World War One, which is only separated by bits of mist, is a pretty tricky job. But the Time Lord is obviously playing his own game and would rather like to become leader of the galaxy and have power, which of course the Time Lords wouldn't allow him to do if he was under their auspices.
Yeah, he definitely has the most fun. I love his facial hair.
Here's a trick. Is he the only Time Lord to not regenerate?
How does he get shot? Does he die again? I've completely forgotten how he dies.
He just gets done with with that laser gun that creates the circle effect on the screen. He gets shot by a Warlord and his guards.
Yeah.
Pretty ordinary death, actually.
I feel like it's one of those areas where you can tell which they're making up as they go along.
Yeah, at the time they were still trying to nail it. The reason there's such a mystery around the Time Lords in this is because it's a mystery even to the writers themselves.
And I kind of feel like we shouldn't look into it too much, because as soon as it's one of those things. No, it's one of those things. As soon as you start trying to poke holes in, you'll find holes, quite large ones.
Yeah. If anything, I just want to explain the hole to be like, oh, that's a quirky hole in Who history. This is a proof they don't have it all worked out. So yeah, shout out the War Chief, a Time Lord who can't regenerate.
Yeah.
Like being a squib in Harry Potter, isn't it?
Shall we move on to the story? Let's quickly go through some of the story, because I don't want to be here until 11 o'clock.
Yes, neither do I. Look, we've been through a lot of the story, but so really, instead of going through like the whole framework, because I feel like we have done, what about we just pick out the good bits, and then maybe we talk about the things that aren't as good on the way?
Yeah, should we kind of do it in order? So should we start off with just the general World War One kind of introductory bit? Yeah,
because that's the first episode and a half. Is we're figuring it out from inside World War One, and the whole thing is we think we're in World War One.
Yes.
We get introduced to everything in the War Games very slowly, very cleverly, and I, as a writer, and I know go on about this, being a writer and having written, the way all the information is delivered is perfect.
It's a perfect way to slowly reveal the twist. Which is why at the beginning I said I wanted to not know about that twist.
It's just there is twist on twist on twist as well. You think that the big twist has happened, but then there's another one.
But they never
layered on.
But it's never, in the grand scheme of things, it's never a big twist. But it stacks and then stacks and then stacks and stacks and stacks. And you kind of look over Clifford and go, my God, I started from that point.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what a great long story does, is it just slowly changes. And so with every episode, you feel like the stakes are slightly higher and the environment feels slightly different. And we know different things. And with each episode, I mean, even if some of the episodes do get repetitive towards the middle, the things that are being revealed in them aren't at all, and it's keeping the momentum of the whole thing going. It never loses momentum.
Yeah.
Like, we're always pushing and pushing and pushing.
As I think we're setting the characters, I wish at that introduction, the general Smythe and everyone else in that kind of environment gets built up on a little bit more. It kind of feels like they're introduced as such strong characters, and as we put on those twists, they're kind of just inherently forgotten about.
Yeah, it's difficult when you have such a high concept story, this whole wars from across time pulled out of their own times into one planet of unknown origin. It's just mental and off the wall. It's difficult when you have such a high concept to keep in touch with the basics.
Yeah.
And occasionally they do lose sight of the characters. But I'm not going to criticise them too much for it, because there's so much they're trying to do, and I think the characters still come through.
Yeah. Yeah. As we said at the beginning, every negative we say about this story, for the most part, is nitpicking.
That's a nitpick. Because in reality, it's what you want. Is if you wanted more focus on the characters, that's great, but you'll probably have to accept there's going to be less ironing out of the lore around the story. It's a compromise.
Exactly. And then, shall we move on from World War One into
the best reveal of the whole thing is when we learn that there isn't just World War One. Yeah.
So
the red
like
coat that does it for me.
Yeah, it's that red coat and the TV screen thing.
Yeah, just those little things, and then the red coat going, "Oh, it's 1745." No, it's not. And then you see the Roman Legion 5 minutes later.
Can I just say, this is the biggest nitpick I could possibly nitpick, but I'm going to nitpick on this nitpick. The fact which the clip from the Romans charging is the same both times they used, even though they're on different sides of the story.
I know it is. But do you know what? In some ways, you could say that that's beautiful, and it's a reference to the fact that Roman legions always fought in a very precise order. Because if you know anything about Roman battle tactics, very, very precise.
As I said, it is a nitpick on top of a nitpick about a nitpick for nitpick's sake.
But it's like we get about 15 seconds of Roman footage in this entire story, and yet it's still seen as like a big wow moment.
And it's also, you need to remember as well, this would have been shown, considering the length of this story, probably almost 2 months later. The average viewer would not realise.
Yeah, a full 2 months. Then, after the Roman thing, it's what I like about that initial sequence of recognising that they're outside of time, going through the mist, having all this thing built up, is that once we learn with the characters, particularly we don't learn with the Doctor so much as we feel like the Doctor's one step ahead with a lot of the story. We're learning more with Carstairs and Jennifer. We're learning from an ordinary perspective as opposed to from the Doctor's, which I always think is more interesting. And makes the story more engaging for you as a viewer when you're learning on a human level.
It's what Russell T Davies did, particularly with Rose at the beginning, using the audience surrogate character to sort of allow the audience member to be confused with the character rather than just going in all-knowing Doctor's a god, like someone else.
Giving you everything. Oh, his name is Stephen, and...
anyway.
What else? I can't believe, by the way, and I know we've side noted to Moffat already this season, the first episode of that damn Moffat era literally is designed to introduce the Doctor as a god, and it doesn't stop.
We don't have time. This is a really long episode.
It's just important to mention. I also think, because I was going to mention the cliffhanger in episode 3, that's kind of where we were getting to. The cliffhangers throughout this story are great.
Yeah, they are.
Pretty much all of them are. And
the thing which I respect is that they're all great. And for the most part, they're all good ways out of it.
For the most part. There's some conveniences. For example, the first one's a little bit like, oh, okay, that kind of came out of nowhere because you think the Doctor's about to be shot by firing squad. But it's set up.
And that's what I was going to say. But midway through my sentence, I realised there's an explanation for that.
Tell me.
It's a bit of foreshadowing, it's a hidden twist. It's a Resistance member. It's most likely a resistance member, isn't it?
I suppose it could be, yeah. If we go with that, then yeah.
That's the most obvious explanation, isn't it? Because that's what I thought that all the way up until the sentence I just said. And I went, wait, no, he's probably just a resistance member.
That'd be great if it is. I wonder if we could ever get some clarity on whether that was. Might have to check because obviously some of the resistance they have different. I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, there's one particularly really good cliffhanger, but I'll get to that one when we get to it. The episode 3 one's great when the Doctor and Zoe step into the space-time door and we have no idea where they've gone. That just throws you off completely. And then just little twists here and there, like the lecture sequence. This would be a throwaway scene in any other Doctor Who story. And in this one, it feels tense and is interesting. And then Carstairs comes in and you've got the stakes there. And then the Doctor's literally teaching him what to do while trying to hide it. It's all of the layers are great, even in scenes that don't feel that important.
They have managed to use for 10-parters so well to cake the other long stories we've got. It feels like they've had a 4-parter and went, scratch it out.
Yeah,
here it
desperately
feels like they went in with a mindset of we need to have this happen in this story, we need to have this happen in that story, and then we need to have this happen in that story, and it works. Almost.
From a story perspective, you can tell that they have put this up on a wall and they've talked about it for months and they've nailed out where to put everything.
Which is what impressed me, the fact there was a mistake.
Yeah, the fact they've turned it from effectively a mistake to something that's that thoroughly planned and that well put together. It is fantastic. It's fantastic writing, just generally. Not just for Who, for anything.
Right, shall we move on?
Yeah, we get through 5 and 6 feel a little bit repetitive. We're kind of just
in that
doing schemes.
It's in that central zone where it just feels like they spent a tad bit too long running around.
One of the issues is we get a lot of scenes where basically the trick of the generals who are in on this War Games pattern is they have either a monocle or spectacles, whatever, and through that lens they're able to mind control whoever's around them for the most part.
That's why I wear glasses.
And we see... Oh, God. I can see his glasses, I'm dead. And we see a lot of that in the first few episodes. That comes up again and again and again. And it's good for an effect the first 2 times, but certainly by the end you think, are we doing just the same trick? And then we're going to have Jamie go, but you just listen to that. And we just hear that all the time. It works, but it was a bit overkilled.
Yeah. In fact, it only seems to happen... with those 2 characters, we never see it being used anywhere else in the world. It kind of it's one of those things which it feels like they forgot about midway through.
Do you know what it's just reminded me of? My favourite character in this whole story, completely irrelevant to the story, but my favourite one, and the one I'd want to most be to my friend, the cute little German soldier who's so impressed by the sonic screwdriver.
Yeah.
Oh, it lifted you to not touch. And it's got to do it again.
Do it again. Wait, no, I remember now. I remember. You're not a spy. Oh, I love it.
You are Sonic Screwdriver Man.
Yeah.
Also, isn't it beautiful that the Sonic Screwdriver is used in this episode only for the purpose of actually turning a screw?
So, well, a few times.
What? Thank goodness the gun wasn't wooden, huh?
What else do you want to speak about?
Well, we can get to the end, really. We can get towards the last few bits. The Turtleneck Lord's introduction is well layered in because we get so many mentions of him overhanging, and so he's built up really well. So when he arrives, it's such a big moment. And it's not to say that it's a letdown. It's just it's different to what you expect. He's not this kind of huge, threatening, imposing figure.
You expect
just like a guy,
a big, imposing figure, and what you really get is bureaucrat. Yeah,
bureaucrat. And the bureaucrat's threatening enough, and he seems pretty cutthroat. But it's just a different approach. I think what I enjoy about those episodes is the machinations between the Doctor, the War Chief, and the Head of Security, and personally the fact that most of the problems that happen with the enemy side are just down to people trying to save face. Mm-hmm. And that feels like the theme of everything. Smythe saying that the Doctor's already dead, then realising he might be the only person who knows where the things he actually needs is, then trying to call off the death, then failing to call off the death, and then, even though it's not dead because the resistance fighters arrive, then he's the one who dies.
Yeah.
And then the last words we hear of it was, Smythe was a fool, he deserved to die.
Which is fair enough.
And the head of security, time and time again, just completely disregarding orders that would have easily ended this whole problem because he's so desperate to prove that he's right about this conspiracy he has.
Yeah.
But all of this is good writing for me. It's not like it's copping out because the decisions don't feel stupid. You know when you watch a horror movie and you think, don't go in the house, you idiot? Like with a lot of Doctor Who stories, you get this, don't go in the house, you idiot. It's that obvious. With this, yes, it's stupid, but it's motivated stupid.
It's stupid. You can see their mindset of it. Of like, you can see General Smythe wants to get his own back. He doesn't quite realise how important the Doctor is.
Yes.
And then he realised how important...
He made a justifiably stupid decision.
And then you eventually realise... Then you watch his face as he realises which the Doctor is actually important.
Oh, God, that's funny. When he just runs out the window and goes, stop!
But then, shall we...
And everyone gets that.
Shall we move on to the ending, then?
Yeah, I think... Straight on to episode 9. So... The introduction of the Time Lords. I mean, it's the first mention we get of Time Lords around episode 5-6, where it's revealed the War Chief's the Time Lord. Obviously, you have to take us out of it because obviously we prick up at that, but no one really would have pricked up at that. Before we go, okay, that's a race of people, fine. Then around episode 8, we realise, the Doctor's a Time Lord. I mean, it's kind of foreshadowed and there's mention to the fact that they can control time technology, and you think, well, the Doctor has that, so maybe that's it. It gets revealed. They have the big conversation about what was the thing? All of the stuff about running away from Gallifrey, having similarities. But all the while, it's just introducing who are the Time Lords, who are the Time Lords, who are the Time Lords, so that when the Time Lords have to come in, it's treated like the biggest event. It's like calling the gods down from on high. Yeah.
I do feel like the way they got him to call it was a bit weird.
Yeah,
so sitting down praying
while he builds a cube out of a net of a cube.
Yeah, and then the cube kind of gets sent away. It's so
strange,
but okay.
So very strange, but it does the job. But it continues to set up this weird off-putting vibe, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then my personal favourite moment of the whole Time Lord introduction is when the Warlord goes, when he meets the Time Lords, he'll wish he didn't call them. They are coming. With just the sound. It's genuinely like the sky is falling.
Yeah.
And then the cliffhanger, Owen. The episode 9 cliffhanger, which has got to be one of the best things I've seen shot on Who, period. The slow motion run to the TARDIS. As
the Time Lords slowly come into play, they will slowly...
And you realise just how powerful they are.
Yeah.
One step by one step by one step. And the Doctor's getting more and more desperate, and James is getting more and more confused. And it's just brilliant. It's a brilliant sequence.
And then as we come out of that, we see the TARDIS essentially going back through the Doctor's history. We see it covered in a web from Web Planet. We see it on top of the sea from Fury from the Deep.
Yeah.
And then I think there's another instance of it as well, which I've completely forgotten. And then he's in the court of the Time Lords.
Yes, where the Warlord also gets his trial, which doesn't end particularly well for the Warlord. Turtleneck Lord, sorry.
I feel like one of the reasons why I don't like that ending is because I feel like for Warlord just feels a little bit out of place.
I admit he does. It would have been better if it was just the Doctor there. I agree with that.
It just feels like...
I get why the Warlord's there.
It feels like
it wraps up the episode more.
It just feels like it's unnecessary baggage from the last episode.
I do think that by the end of episode 9, the closure had been achieved.
Yeah.
But there we go. Once the Warlord is dealt with, which is kind of within about 6-7 minutes anyway, then we get the 10 minutes of... And Jamie and Zoe do get a proper goodbye, although they try till the last second to get out of it, which is so Jamie and Zoe and so fitting to them. I think the scene in which they actually say goodbye to is very heartfelt and pulls on the emotions in the right way. we get, obviously, the shots in the court of them returning back to their lives, which gives a real nice closure sense in the way that Ian and Barbara's departure did, and perhaps the others never really did.
Agreed. At least it actually went up the end of the story.
Yeah, and then we get, once we've got through all of that, and all that baggage is done, Jamie's out of the picture, and it's just the Doctor and his people telling him he's been a bad boy, we get the scene. And if you ever watched any of those Regeneration compilations, or you've been through the Who history, you've watched this scene 10 times, and I've watched this scene 10 times. I can quote it.
So I've heard how it went was that Patrick Troughton was asked to perform under pressure, and he refused. So they went with Bohemian Rhapsody.
Honestly, shut up. Honestly. Neither of those songs were out at the time.
I don't care.
Freddie Mercury was still a boy going around pubs claiming he could sing. Admittedly, he was right, but he was just going around.
I don't care. I just wanted to annoy you slightly.
That joke is awful.
Thank you.
I cannot believe this is becoming the bad dad joke Who podcast.
I've only done 2.
I can tell when a trend is brewing. You need to nip that in the bud quickly. But yeah, it's the scene. He is sent, and this obviously sets up an entirely new era of Who moving forward. We're going to take the TARDIS away. We're going to strip it back. We're going to try and make it more rooted in the real world.
Yeah.
But we do that by doing the most ridiculous mystical bit of the whole lot, which I think is beautiful. It's like one last stab of we are insane and we don't care. I love the last shots of this. Troughton winding around in the circle, losing his face and into the dark.
Yeah, it is a good ending. And, the Time Lords are just so powerful, which they just gave us colour. With his sentence,
that was the Time Lords.
With the Doctor's sentence, they gave human race colour. And with that, we have to end this podcast. What do you give this episode out of 10?
I'm still going to give it a 9 because it's a bit repetitive in the middle, and there are some things that don't work perfectly. And I know it's nitpicky, but it can get a bit repetitive. But it's the best episode I think I've watched so far doing this podcast. It beats Dalek Invasion of Earth.
That's
saying something.
I'm going to say 8 or a 9. Partly because I'm still not convinced on that last episode.
I get that. If you have problems with the last episode, because I've really kind of gone with it, and I've sold on it.
I understand why it's there, but it feels unnecessarily tacked onto this story.
But don't you think it's a beautiful thing? And it's almost like you think you've got out, and then it pulls you in the worst way. Like it feels like the end of the story, but it isn't because of the twist.
Yes, but I feel like it's a weird area where it feels too out of it, but it's kind of got this remembrance thing of the Warlord just being there. I
suppose.
I feel like if we saw the Time Lords in the launch bay area, so kind of taking place in sort of like a bodged court in the area of the story, so we've still got some attachments to the story, it probably would have been better. It just feels slightly too attached, and we just kind of have the War Chief just kind of there.
I think what would have been cooler is if the Time Lords showed up at the end of episode 9, just did away with the Warlord and War Chief like it was nothing, like it was absolute fodder, and then we went up to Gallifrey and did the trial for episode 10.
Yeah.
But there are different ways of playing it, and you would lose that really cool cliffhanger, and it's tough.
Yeah, as I say, it's one of those things of I really love this story, but the issue is as well, which I have with this story, is that I would recommend people watch it. But the issue is, it's very well done and it's really good. It is still like 200 minutes long.
It's about 4 hours and 10 minutes.
Yeah, and
it's a chunky old story.
That's the only thing which would put me off suggesting it to someone else. So
If you want to do it, I would recommend it, but just know that it's 4 hours and know that you're in for a long haul. Try and split it in half, maybe. However you like to play it.
Don't be insane and do what we did.
No, but there we go. I think it's worth it, but you have to make your own decision on that. And that means, now that we've got to the end of the War Games, the next podcast we're putting out is the heralded, famous and favourite of our fans. End of season What Happened? Season 6.
We'll be looking back at this mild disappointment of a season.
Which ended phenomenally.
Yes, it had its high points, but my God, most of it were low points. So,
story of the Leeds Premier League season.
So if you want to subscribe wherever you get your podcast, make sure that is delivered straight into your inbox.
And then after that, it's colour. It's colour. I know. It's so close now. Of course, as well, if you ever want to get in touch with us about anything Doctor Who related, especially if you've seen this episode and you want to wax lyrical about whether you like it or even don't, you can get in touch with us on Twitter at Black Archive Pod. That's our handle. And we're also available via email if you'd rather go for something longer. That's blackarchivepod@gmail.com. No caps, no spaces.
So remember to leave a review as well. But that's it for now. Thank you very much for listening. Have a good evening.
All right. We'll see you soon. Goodbye.